The first time I watched Lost in Translation, I was on a plane ride home from a conference for a job I did not enjoy doing. I had food poisoning. It was a real low place, but therefore memorable. I was alone, feeling down, and in that moment I was sort of able to see who I was truly. I recall Lost in Translation settling me in on that flight with its cinematography, its score. It transported me when I was in dire need of being transported somewhere else mentally. I've always been one to romanticize foreign places, especially those I've never been to. I'm aware that it's because in my mind it's a clean slate. It's a blank canvas for me to project my own life onto, therefore seeming perfect or perhaps just superior to the current messy canvas I have of my own life, one in which I continue to attempt to clean and organize. I really enjoyed the film during that viewing, but I wasn't head over heels in love with it. This time around, Lost in Translation asked to be watched by me again, asked for a second chance. I had about 25 films I had told myself I'm going to watch next before something like this, but something drew me to HBO, and as soon as I saw Lost in Translation, I threw it on. As I do with many films, I intentionally started it too late, so that I couldn't finish it in one sitting. I enjoy watching some of a film, then getting to exist in its context in my mind until I inevitably finish it the next day. I sat down to watch it today and immediately fell back into its world. My mom came down and watched the final 25 minutes with me. "Oh, so they're both cheaters," she proclaimed when seeing the singer in Bob's room, and as I told her, Charlotte had a husband. Black and white, brush your hands, boom boom, they're pigeonholed, simple. It's not that simple, though. It's never that simple. I stayed silent, keeping that moment to myself instead of trying to explain to my mother why they're both people, humans, trying, lost. It would have just gotten lost in translation. She would have heard my words through her own filter, and as much as I try to reduce and perhaps even mitigate the influence of my own filter, I would have heard what I wanted to hear from her words back. I want to address this off the bat. I felt this film was incredibly respectful and curious towards Japanese culture. I felt love instead of fear whenever they were referred to, spoken about, or shown from any character's perspective. I'm not on board with completely writing a film off or calling its directors or artists racist or xenophobic just because there are jokes about people who are different. I feel that's such an easy route to take, and while this is a film set in Japan following two white characters, that isn't what the experience is about. It saddens me that people completely ignore any good about this film and give it bad ratings just because they want to weaponize it as a way to further their own superiority-fueled existence. If you critically think for a moment, watch through the credits, you can see how many Japanese individuals and companies signed on to this project. The crew was practically 100% Japanese. Don't you think they would be able to read the intentions of the artists better than you? There's so much good about this film to focus on instead of its contention. I know that my experience with the film was one of love, of relating myself to both of these characters in their respective lives. This is one of those films that I feel can reach out and grab you if you're in the correct mood to be pulled into this world, and that certainly happened to me. I'm here today to share my experience with the film. One of the most exciting things about sharing experiences and using words is that your experience with this video will be completely unique. You will misunderstand me and will never truly be on the same page. It will be, say it with me, lost in translation. Okay, that's the last time I'll use that. But we'll try to connect over this film through this video, and that's what I feel matters. What is it to be heard? What is it to try to speak to another person? I feel we take for granted as a species how wild it is that we have languages, ways to communicate with one another by simply moving our mouths and projecting sound in a certain way. When you really think about it, we are born into this world and we are forced to simply adopt a language that has existed since far before we were even conceived, therefore one that is inherently restrictive to us. Language is an amazing device, but it's never going to be able to allow us to fully express ourselves. Even when we feel we're getting close, when we're telling the complete and utter truth, like Bob in the bath on the phone with Lydia, where he says he wants to get healthy, take better care of his health. He's shrugged off as going through a midlife crisis or just rambling and ranting. His words are run through his wife, Lydia's, filter, because it is a more comfortable reality for her to filter Bob's words through her filter of knowing him so well or thinking she knows him so well. But what happens when we do this? When we get into this zone of comfort and stop fully listening to people, therefore expecting and assuming things of them, this is when we can actually become more disconnected from them, when we think we know everything about them and have already made up our mind on how they feel. And even as much as we might try to hear another person, like really, really try, we're still going to filter their words through our own life because we need specificity to fully understand a concept. And we find specificity through relating what we're told or what we experience to our own lives and experiences. So then what is it to be heard? Is it possible? On the surface, I'd say no, it's not. But I'd shift the discussion here, because I don't think anyone's really looking for just that. I think we're all aware of how difficult it is to communicate clearly. So I believe what we truly long for is to feel someone's intention of wanting to hear us. Their intention, their curiosity in listening to us in our vulnerable state and accepting the vulnerability for what it is, not distracting themselves in an effort to not feel the vulnerability in themselves, but instead existing in it with us, going nowhere near weaponizing it against us for their own superiority, but communicating to us, hey, I'm in the same boat, or maybe, hey, I'm in a different boat, but we're in the same water here. It's refreshing, relaxing, and rooted in truth when someone leans into that vulnerability. And it has the ability to escalate connections quickly, and that's what I feel happens with Charlotte and Bob. Notice how whenever they talk to one another, it's almost as if they have nothing to hide. Most of attraction and love is unspoken, I feel. And that's certainly the case in Lost in Translation. So much is communicated through glances, through sentences that blend in with one another, unfinished thoughts. It feels as though each of these characters sees each other fully. What is it to see someone, then? I feel it's to try to eliminate your expectations and assumptions of them or what they are, and to just be present in their experience, something Bob and Charlotte are getting none of throughout this entire film from anyone else. Charlotte is not seen by her husband because of his distractedness with work. Bob is unseen by both his wife, who brushes off his dejection towards this commercial shoot because how could someone making $2 million be upset, and also unseen by all of his collaborators in Japan. They are unable to communicate with him and treat him sort of as an animal to parade around to commercial and print shoots, talk shows, to gawk at in the lobby of the hotel. Not maliciously, of course, but I don't think anyone's truly malicious in their misunderstanding of another person. Everyone's distracted by doing their jobs, crossing off tasks on their laundry list of to-dos, everything that comes with being adults, and I feel what Bob and Charlotte see in each other are their own inner children, which I'll get to. First, I want to talk about the ways we as adults distract ourselves. We're all lost. Some of us just distract ourselves. When you bring things into full context, we are, by definition, lost. We're in a random galaxy on a random planet. We are beings that we don't even fully understand, living with other beings of all shapes and sizes that have different levels of consciousness. It is absolutely bonkers when you put it into that perspective. So the question of why we distract ourselves is pretty obvious. To survive, we sort of have to. We'd go crazy if all the time we looked at everything completely objectively. It's a much more surface-level, pleasant experience to worry about shoots for our whiskey brand, or what the kids are having for lunch, or what lens I'm going to use for the shoot today. Without these things, jobs, purpose, tasks to accomplish, we would go insane. Even writing about this now brings a level of existentialism that is very scary to think about, but I do subscribe to the frame of thought that anything the truth can destroy, it should. And I do think, for whatever reason, mostly circumstantial, I'd say, Charlotte and Bob are both in phases of their lives where they feel stuck in reflection often, meditating on what things mean. I think this is what can draw two people together like magnets. Everything becomes silly and pointless when you think of it in this way, and everything also becomes kind of exciting. Look at how much fun Charlotte and Bob have in this expectationless, unserious, detached reality they find themselves in for a short time. It's not nihilistic, it's realistic, and I think the characters' camaraderie can be attested to their deep thoughtfulness and introspection, which would have many quote-unquote normal people label them as lost. I submit that it is them that are actually found, though. They've accomplished everything that those people employing distractions are searching for. Other people will focus on other things in an effort to not come to terms with their mortality, and perhaps the pointlessness of their own existence. However, in my opinion, it's much braver and even more comforting to accept its certainty and to use that to motivate your actions, as to me that provides a much clearer way to live. There is likely a balance that needs to be struck, though, and/or this information must be handled with much care, as living as though nothing matters is a surefire recipe for self-inflicted wounds if you're not careful. But I feel this is the season of life Charlotte and Bob are in, and while you could call it being depressed by nihilism, I feel it more as they're being opened up by objectivism. In a podcast between Edward Norton and Rick Rubin, the two went back and forth about the idea of aging being nothing else besides, quote-unquote, the aggressive pursuit of comfort. I'm so young, and it's so naive to think that I have anything about life figured out. However, I do believe this to be true. When we think about aging and growing up, it is almost completely linked with, quote-unquote, settling down. It's force-fed down our throats so much that it is no wonder why so many people rush into marrying, buying a house, having kids. It's almost as if our inner child, our desire for exploration, danger, newness, is backed into a corner so aggressively that we decide creating another child is the best way forward, the way to get that childlike energy we all enjoy and long for back into our lives. In a way, I feel like we unintentionally sign up for the lifelong torturing of our inner child, and it's society and those around us who are eager to hand us the pen and paper and point to the dotted line to sign. We take jobs that make us money but which we resent. We attach ourselves to people out of safety and don't have the presence of mind not to be possessive with them. We almost eliminate all diversity and novelty in our life so to not experience bad things in life, all to get to a state of comfort that doesn't actually exist. We safeguard ourselves against bad things, and it influences our character, as all the bad or unexpected things in life actually make us better people, stronger individuals. All the things we are taught to avoid are actually what make life worth living. As Ryan Holiday, a modern-day influential Stoic voice, says, the obstacle is the way. In an animalistic manner, though, we pursue comfort so aggressively that we lose all novelty and diversity in our lives, and then wonder why we feel stagnant, why we are depressed and stuck. It's almost as if the closer you get to having everything together in life, in a traditional sense, the further you dig yourself and your inner child into a hole. And the tragedy is that most people distract themselves with things to not feel this exact pain, to try to avoid it totally, as I mentioned in the previous segment. And this interaction, this couple of days between Bob and Charlotte, it felt a bit like finding each other's inner child, and it was beautiful to watch. But to say this was the only force at play would likely be incorrect. No, something that also contributed to their quick connection and intensity of attraction was this love being forbidden, doomed from the start. Alexandre Dumas in The Three Musketeers said, "There is no happiness or unhappiness. There is just the comparison of one event to another." Were Charlotte and Bob truly happy, truly connected with one another in the ways I mentioned before? Or was it simply the circumstances? Probably a bit of both, being in a foreign country, being deeply dissatisfied with their current romantic relationships, feeling they had no one to talk to. They were searching for someone desperately without knowing or admitting to themselves they were doing so. There's also an aspect of forbidden love that likely drew the two together. Without even being conscious we're doing it, I feel like we can often enjoy a situation or a person's company even more purely because of how stark the contrast is to our usual life. Something interesting humans do is secretly enjoy being in trouble, especially when we're usually on our best behavior. There's something dangerous, interesting, unknown about it that causes us to yearn for it. Charlotte is young, beautiful, and respectful towards Bob, while his wife doesn't give him the time of day. Bob gives Charlotte the respect right back, playfully flirts with her and gives her attention, while her husband can't be bothered with her because of his shoot. And these two are both aware that this relationship that they've formed, in fact, will not last forever. They'll both be back to their normal lives soon, and so this setting is sort of a no-rules environment that is only fully enjoyed because of the other side of the contrast that makes it so attractive. It's a fascinating paradox. So then what do? There's surely a mix of comfort and danger that we should strike then? I'm not in a position to give a solution, only sit with the question. But if we were aiming for a solution, I would say it's just to be conscious of what's going on. We cause each other and ourselves so much pain because we refuse to come to terms with reality, with what is objectively going on. It is great to get caught up in the romance, excitement, danger of a moment, but it can lead to destructive behavior if one does not accept and understand the fact that they're so drawn to this is because of the safety they feel in their normal, usual life. I believe you just design your life in a way that you're always prioritizing the truth of what you feel and communicating that. It could be said that all the pain we experience is just by blocking off access to that truth, by doing something that someone else has told us is the better way, is the truth, and not listening to ourselves. It's the truth. It's leaning into it, letting yourself be defined and redefined by it, trying your best and being kind and objective through it all. This type of behavior, though, is so rare that in thinking like it, you can often find yourself in a state of loneliness and introspection. Something that's always struck me about loneliness is how vulnerable it is. Whenever you find yourself alone, or when I find myself alone, there's always a bit of animalism that comes out. I start to look for other people desperately, play characters in my head. I get obsessed with what it is others do when having these feelings, and I even trick myself into thinking no one else is experiencing feelings like these, like everyone else has all their needs met and I'm the only one suffering from something like this. In other words, because of the discomfort felt, we can sometimes try to distract ourselves. It's what we see Charlotte and Bob doing, watching a ton of TV, sitting in their hotel room, swimming, frequenting the hotel's bar. But I do feel loneliness is something we all feel truly, completely. Even when we're surrounded by people, we're often not listened to by so many, and it can be just like we're all by ourselves, in fact, sometimes worse. It's rare when someone fully hears us or sees us. It's such a rare thing. Many people want to sit in the space of comfort and live comfortably, which, as I mentioned, causes them to not be able to fully see others, as they reject part of the truth, and therefore certain parts of themselves are off limits. So how could they see anyone else totally when they don't see themselves that way? But I do feel there are some of us who make the conscious or unconscious choice to hold death, mortality, front of mind, and that drives us. It drives us towards looking for that same feeling in others, a longing for someone to reach out and say, I see and hear exactly what you're saying, even without saying anything at all. This is what I felt made Bob and Charlotte work and resulted in their intense attraction to one another. They were lonely together. They accepted the vulnerability of loneliness and introspection with one another, and therefore found an antidote for it. No one is ever able to fully understand us. To be human is to be misunderstood. And there's something about loneliness in a place like this, where there are no expectations of you. Everything is so new and different that it almost gives you extra space to be with yourself. You can role play how a change would influence your life. You can lean into your being misunderstood and just exist. I feel loneliness is one of the least talked about epidemics in the world. There's nothing like it, and it certainly causes introspection, perhaps pain from that introspection, but I feel a lot of times necessary pain. Loneliness is valuable, not just when it's solitude, voluntary, but also when we're forced to look ourselves in the mirror and realize it's just us here. We're all we truly have in this world. Lost in Translation is a sexy film, for lack of a better word. Shot in 28 days, low-budget indie. That final scene, I mean, you could make an entire video just about that. It proves what filmmaking is capable of. The simplicity of it, the cinematography of Japan, it just lulls you in. I watched this one fully through the credits. That's my favorite part about cinema, when you don't want to leave the film's world. And in saying all of that, I'm so glad this film exists. I'm so glad we exist. Thank you for watching this one. Let me know about your experience with Lost in Translation below in the comments. Follow me on Letterboxd. Subscribe to the channel. Much love. And I'll see you in the next one.